Hey guys. Okay, you've seen the title of this video, and I know what some people are immediately going to be jumping to conclusions. They're going to immediately think, oh man, this guy thinks classic content is hard enough as it is, and it's time to... he doesn't want it to make it any harder because he sucks at the game, and he's a casual, and he's a baby, and blah, 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 blah. And listen, guys, I'm not making this argument because I personally dislike difficult games or I don't like difficult WoW content. I do like difficult WoW content. I've enjoyed the Mage Tower and Legion. I've enjoyed high Mythic Plus keys. I did heroic raiding during Cataclysm. That content was pretty, tuned very tight, pretty difficult. I enjoyed my time with that stuff. But unfortunately, the argument I'm going to be making is more along the lines of, this is not a good thing for the greater raiding ecosystem of vanilla, and I'm going to explain why. So first of all, I want to draw a point of comparison to retail WoW. So retail WoW, you're pushing high Mythic Plus keys, and there's two things going on with these high Mythic Plus keys. Number one, they're difficult. They're fucking difficult. They're fucking hard. You need 5 guys who are pretty elite, really know what they're doing. They're at the far end of the skill curve, the high end of the skill curve, really know what they're doing in order to make this Mythic Plus work. And the second thing that's going on is that there's a strong punishment for failure. There is a strong punishment for failure. Not only do you not get to progress, you actually regress through a mechanic called key depletion. So you actually have to go down to a lower level key of the Mythic Plus, and you have to reprogress back to your original spot, basically. So high punishment for failure, very demanding, very tough content. What happens? Tons of gatekeeping. You need to have the right Raider IO score. Even if you have the right Raider IO score, but you're playing a non-meta spec, go fuck yourself. Whatever. People will deny you in the group finder for any reason they can find or no reason at all. Okay? They just don't like the sound of your name. Whatever. People are very gatekeepy. You got to find some players, and they've got to be elite players that got to know what the fuck they're doing. And I don't believe that retail players are inherently shittier or nastier or more gatekeepy than classic players. I think that they are a product of their environment. Now we look at the classic environment. This is not the Turtle WoW environment. I'm talking about the classic environment. Classic environment, still punishing for failure. You've got world buffs. You've got consumables that fall off on death. All the battle elixirs and potions and other things that you use mid-combat that just effectively go to waste if the attempt goes to shit, right? So it's still very punishing to fail. And then there's the wipe recovery. It takes ages to recover and buff everyone up and do all that shit. It's really punishing to fail in vanilla WoW, and it's even more punishing to fail in the context of world buffs and consumables and all that stuff. So there's still a very high punishment for failure, but the content is tuned very loosely. It's pretty weak. It's weak stuff compared to the massive power budget that all the players have due to stacking the consumes and stacking the world buffs and all that stuff. So the content is easy, but there's still a high punishment for failure. So people are a little gatekeepy, but they're not really that gatekeepy. They might say no meme specs, we don't want any boomkins or something. They might say, you have no fucking gear, I'm not bringing you to an X-Raid. You don't have your world buffs, I'm not bringing you to an X-Raid. But it's not that bad. You can generally get your foot in the door. And the other reason you can get your foot in the door is because it's 40 people, right? It's 40 people, so naturally the group organizers have to lower their standards. They can't afford to only recruit from the very cream of the crop, top of the skill curve anymore. They have to get a wide variety of players all over the place on the skill curve. You're going to get a small minority of elite players, you're going to have some pretty good players, and then you're going to have some average players, some below average players, and then you're going to have some actively shit players. Okay, so it's just kind of a normal distribution of players, and that's just the necessity of raiding. And because it's a normal distribution of 40 plus players, you can't really afford to have like super hardly tuned content. But if you do make super hardly tuned content, what's going to happen is it's going to coincide with the fact that failure is punishing, failure is costly. It costs you outside of raid and consumes and like repair costs, and like there's an economy game in which it is punishing to fail, and that's when things really start getting rough. People are going to start denying you based on what class you are. They're gonna start wanting to exclude people who they think suck at the game. Whether they perceive they suck at the game, they might not suck at the game. They might just, who knows. But it's really gonna get nasty and gatekeepy. And here's another way of comparison: Season of Discovery, guys. Season of Discovery. It was still basically the vanilla environment. The only thing that changed, the raids got harder. What happened? Immediately, they're like, we don't want this class. You need to show me your achievement or your whatever the hell, your log showing me that you've completed the raid before. Otherwise, I want nothing to do with you. Get fucked. So the difficulty of the raid content and the punishment for failure informs player behavior. It informs the raiding ecosystem. And I think that hard raids are just going to make for an unpleasant ecosystem for the majority of players. All right. So obviously this isn't a concern for elite players that only play with other elite players who have that kind of luxury. But for like that Joe Average and his Joe Average guild, yes, this is a very real problem, a very real concern. And even for the elite players, they don't have the liberty of only playing with other elite players. At the end of the day, they've got a roster boss to fight as well. And so they're going to have to play with some not so elite players. So if you have a very demanding, very hard raid, it's just gonna make people very annoyed, very pissed. At the end of the day, like when there's hard gaming content, like think of Devil May Cry, guys. Devil May Cry is a really hard game, but you have access to the same toolkit as every other player. There's no such thing as like a class or gear disparity going on. Okay, when you fail in Devil May Cry, you just go again. You just try again. You just try the encounter again. It's not a big deal, right? When you fail in Devil May Cry, the only thing that's really standing between you and success is your individual skill at the game. It's all on you. It's nobody else. That's it, right? So this is just a 40-man raid is just not an appropriate context to have super tight, super demanding content is what I'm driving at here. And if you do it anyway, you're just going to get a very nasty raiding environment. At the end of the day, I think a lot of the people who play this game, they play the game that they're not super invested in farming consumables outside a raid. They don't think that's a ton of fun. I feel like they would play the game. I think there are a ton of people who would play this game more and would do like Turtle WoW and vanilla raiding more if there wasn't this barrier of world buffs and consumables and like this economic like imagine if people could just sapper whenever they wanted. Cost was no object. They could just sapper on cooldown. Not a big deal. They got to play with all the items, all the fun toys that Classic has available. I think people would have so much more fun with the game. I think the game would be... If the average guy just raid logging, could just enjoy raiding as a hobby, didn't need to play the economy mini game outside of the game in order to do all the things you can do in raid, the game would be so much more fun. The game would be so fucking cool, right? But the game is not that cool because... there's this game outside the game and the economy and the consumables really bear down on people, and those costs really start to rack up during progression content, and it's going to be progression content because the content is hard. Look at the way they've phrased this. Look at the way they've phrased this like UKH. Their exact quote on like the Discord in like the announcement was something to the effect of, no, I actually get their exact quote. So they actually said, this raid We'll challenge 40 players with gameplay even more difficult than Naxxramas, giving the truly determined a chance to prove their strength against formidable foes. Oh, big talk, whatever. So they're trying to like steer into the hardcore crowd, and it's just like, man, I really don't know if this is a good direction to go in. I really don't know if this will be great for the social environment of like raiding. I mean, I think a bunch of people are just going to say, juice is not worth the squeeze. They're just going to bounce right off of it and say, fuck this. I'm just going to, it's not worth me farming consumables or board. It's not worth me, farming a shitload of gold to get this arcane resistance gear. It's not worth whatever, right? So I think it's just, I think ultimately super hard content isn't going to be bad for the game. So if I don't think like super hard raids are good for the game, what would I suggest instead? Here's what I would say. If you really want to like lean into like the sweats, if you really want to have challenging content in vanilla, here's what I would say. Number one, you can have the challenging content be in a limited group size. It's a lot easier to curate a small list of players, of elite players, if it's like a 10-man raid or like a 5-man instance, right? You should have these sorts of challenges in those sorts of lower player count things. And if you really want to make like elite raid content, here's the way to do it. Do it in one of the most critically acclaimed raids ever, okay? Ulduar. Now, Ulduar was clearable by the bottom 80% of players, all right? You would get it eventually. You might have had more trouble than maybe, some of the best players in the world, but you'd get there eventually if you were, determined to do it. So, Ulduar was clearable by basically everyone. But there were hard modes. There was Elgalon the Observer. There was Yogg Zero Light. There were these crazy challenges for the truly dedicated to aspire to. And they got some, flex vanity rewards, and they also got, some actual really good items out of it. And that's basically how I'd do it. I would say Tower of Karazhan. You've got the main raid tier. You beat the main raid tier. Okay, cool. That's accessible to like 80% of players. It's pretty reasonable. It doesn't like bust your balls with consumable demands, and you do it, and you get your like full tier set for the raid, and then what's going on? You beat the whole raid. There's actually this side room with this boss that's a massive difficulty spike, and he has this very small curated list of loot that is exclusive to him, and if you want to do it, he's there. If you want to kill him, he's there. It's like Final Fantasy X. Tons of people have played Final Fantasy X. They've completed Final Fantasy X. Great game, fantastic game. Very few of them have beaten Penance, the optional super boss. You don't have to kill him. You really don't have to kill him. But if you want to, he's there. And that has some niche appeal for some players, and they pursue that, and they enjoy that. But there's a ton of other players who, they just beat the game. They enjoyed the story. They loved the game. And they put it on the shelf, and they never beat Penance. Like, who cares, right? And, Johnny Casual is going to try that exclusive hard fight. That's a huge difficulty spike. He's going to get the boss to 90% like 2 times, and he's going to be like, fuck this, whatever. You know what I mean? Like, so that's the way I think hard content should be done. I think that's the way hard content should be implemented. I think that also everything should be done on Turtle WoW to make the economic side of like raiding upkeep as minimal as possible. I think that, when they basically made that happen in SOD. In SOD, they did various changes to make it so that like, they basically made consumables cheap as chips. They made consumables a non-issue, and nobody complained. Nobody gave a shit. Nobody was like, oh man, this is terrible for the game that you've devalued the economy and made like, at the end of the day, people just want to raid. They don't want to play fucking EVE Online, okay? I don't know why, like, there's like, maybe there's like a small minority of gold bugs, but I think there's just a large majority of players who just want to log on, click their fucking potions, and fucking play the game with some boys and clear some fucking content, right? It's not, it doesn't have to be this hard. It shouldn't have to be this hard. And so we should lessen the punishment for failure by minimizing consumable costs. We should not have super hard, super tightly tuned content. And if we are going to have super hard, tightly tuned content, it should be like parallel, off to the side. Here's a bragging rights reward. Pursue it if you want. You know, you don't have to do it, basically. That's the way I think it should be done. I think, I think super hard, like vanilla WoW content is a matter of, it's that classic saying, it's so true. You think you do, but you don't. That's all, guys.